I'm going to say that this is the last attempt at it starting a video. If this one doesn't work out, I'm probably going to go home and then like come back over here with my skate stuff because this is getting on my nerves. I have restarted the video like 7 or 8 times. And I keep, like tripping over stuff and just like, I don't know. It just, my head becomes a hot mess and I abort. Right? It's like whatever was happening, whatever I was trying to talk about, fuck it, we're moving on. But I will start with this point. So I've talked a lot lately about possibly, getting rid of a bunch of my like more Christmas oriented stuff, and I have my Charlie Brown Christmas stuff like my leggings posted for sale on Facebook, but I've actually, since yesterday, I have been thinking about taking them back down, and maybe I will keep them after all. But I think, okay, so I got them out the other day, out of the drawer, so I could set them out, take pictures of them, get them posted. Figured do it before Christmas, and that because surely somebody would be more likely to buy them before Christmas, right? So I get them posted, and that's like 2 or 3 days ago. Yesterday morning, I was laying in bed and I was awake, and I was thinking through a bunch of stuff. And then I got to a point where I was ready to, I wanted to write down some of the stuff that I was thinking. And, so I opened my curtains so I can have my light in there, and, I spent 3 hours writing. And one of the things that got my attention was the leggings on this, there's like a stack of boxes at the foot of my bed. And it had the Charlie Brown gang all around Snoopy's doghouse and singing Christmas carols or something. And I looked at it, and it was just like, I was thinking about like whether I actually wanted to go through with getting rid of them, because they are cute. I do like them. I just feel less inclined to, I'm changing how I'm looking at the holiday season, and what I'm actually celebrating, and where traditions have come from. And anything that's religiously based is getting kicked to the curb, right? Like I'm done with religion. I want no part of it. So, I'm sitting there looking at this pair of leggings and just thinking about it, and thinking about the community aspect of the holidays, right? And of course, it didn't have everybody. It had like the main group around the doghouse with Snoopy and all that. And I got to thinking, it's like, so that's kind of like my family, right? They like doing the togetherness things and spending the time together and all that fun stuff, right? But the one character that's not on there, that's always been my favorite, was Spike, right? The little Snoopy's brother that lives in the desert in a cactus by himself. And I was just thinking about like that point. It's like that's like, I feel like that's part of the disconnect on like, because I shouldn't have anything against Snoopy. I think what triggered that whole thing was there is, the little thing where Linus is talking about, or telling the Christmas story, the religious tradition version of the Christmas story, right? So that's probably why I've been thinking about getting rid of those as well. But then when I was sitting there yesterday writing and just thinking about, like, it's like I am, in my family, I am the one that's like, I want to be off doing my own thing. I don't want to be in the middle of all the community stuff anymore. And I'm not the only one like that. My brother's moved to freaking Oklahoma at this point in time, right? So, and I got one cousin that it sounds like there's the possibility that he might be around this year for Christmas, but he has not been around for a few years. And he changed his religious beliefs, but his fiance is into Christmas, so I guess there's a possibility that they will be around, right? So I'm not the only one that's had their own thing that they're trying to do, and not necessarily even for Christmas, just in general. It's like I spent a lot of time on here talking about how, like, I wasn't raised to have my own life. I was raised to be ass deep in, like, all the family stuff, and, family's, like, everything, right? And it's been frustrating because, of course, as I've been navigating the whole healing journey, I realized that the family is a big part of the problems that I've had over the years, and where a lot of the bad beliefs have come from, and where I've felt so stuck, right? And like at the end of yesterday's video, I mentioned that I had watched this Keynote Tarot reading yesterday, and one of the things she said was that it's like she said there's something else waiting for you, but it's like your spirit team isn't going to allow you to rush off into it to escape this other thing. It's like, that's not what it's supposed to be. It's not you enter the next phase of your life because you're running from the last. You have to figure out how to be in this space, and I go back and forth on whether I'm going to have any connection with any of them after I get out of here. Sometimes I feel like hell no, and sometimes it's like maybe a great rare occasion. But then the issue would be knowing that on the rare occasion that I did make an appearance, my mom's automatically going to be the one that's, shifts into guilt trip mode, right? So it's like that's the snag that I've always had, is knowing that there's still that guilt trip possibility if I were to leave and have my own life and then try to come back for anything, right? Because I'm not going to stay here forever. I do not want to. I want to have my own life. I have not been allowed to have my own life, and now I'm choosing to do things that will help me to have my own life, because I don't like what I was raised to believe, or how stuck I've felt all of these years. But like, even thinking like all the ways along the way where I would get to a point where in my mind I would be like, there's no way I'm coming back to this town after I get out of here. Like, that was my thought when I went to undergrad, and then I had like nothing came together, so I had to come back because I had nothing else to go to, right? And it's like, when she said that in the tarot reading, it's like, well, that kind of makes sense. It's like every time I've been like trying to do something else as a means of running away from what's been or what I'm used to, that's not how I'm meant to leave. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to stay, I don't know. If I stay connected, they're not going to be able to be ass deep in my business all the time. And see, one of the big things, like yesterday, like every time I talk about my dad, or have to be around him at all, I cannot bring myself to want to be around him. Right? Because like, as far as just knowing how, like, okay, when I moved back in the process of getting my divorce, I cannot tell you how many times I walked in a room and he had some asshole on TV who's preaching about how wrong divorce is, right? And you know, if you're a Christian especially, you're just not supposed to ever do this thing. But it's like the whole system is set up so you marry the wrong people. You marry people you're not meant to be with. And then, like in my dad's case, if you, you know, you go on to procreate because that's what you're supposed to do, right? But it's not. While it's a life he chose it because he felt obligated to be around to take care of my grandparents in their later years, right? So it's like, it wasn't the life he chose because he wanted it, right? It was the life he chose because he could fulfill his obligations to his parents, right? So, you know, so yesterday's big thing was thinking about the whole name stuff, right? Okay, going back to my dad, I have a really hard time feeling connected to him at all. Like, as far as, you know, I've talked on here a whole lot. A lot of my videos have talked about something that I've been working through because he put it on me to have to deal with, right? You know, like I think it was like the third or fourth video I did. It was November 17th, 2023 was a day that he and I got into it and he called me a dumb bitch, right? Because that's the connection that I have with my father. And no, he hasn't always done it as blatantly outright as he did in that moment, but he's always been condescending. Like, one of the things that he does that I didn't ever pay any attention to it until the last couple years. Like, okay, we were going to McAllister's, right? And, you know, it was like, whether my mom was there or not, there's been some occasions we've gone to McAllister's and he would get something and then, you know, kind of be like, you know, I didn't know if he really liked it or not. And I said I liked what I had, right? And he's like, well, what do you get? And I said, I get this. It's a chicken Caesar wrap and mac and cheese, right? That's like, every time I go to McAllister's, that's what I get because that's what I like there. I mean, not that I've had other stuff there. When I started going there, it was always like the Spud, but then I discovered that, and that's been my go-to ever since. But knowing that he's going to, at some point, it always happens, he decides, well, I'll get what you're getting because I like it, right? But then what happens is, well, it's okay. I don't really like it. It's not really that good. You know, it's like automatically trying to chip away at the thing I like, or I said that I like, because he's trying to bring me into his chaos again, right? So yesterday's big frustration was thinking about the whole name change thing, right? So I spent my whole life with the last name Jones, right? And felt very, it's very lame. It's so boring, right? But, you know, and it's never really fit. That's the interesting thing. Like, yeah, people knew me by that name, sure, but like in basic training, they were always trying to pick at me, but they never got my name right when they were trying to do that shit, right? I usually got, they mixed me up with my main battle buddy, who she went in with her married name, even though she was divorced when she got there, right? She hadn't changed her name yet because she had, I think partly because she had 2 kids, I don't know, maybe she just hadn't gotten to it. I don't know. But anyway, since I was with her all the time, they always called me her name instead of my name, right? So I kind of felt bad for her because she's always getting yelled at, but then they didn't actually mean her. So it's like, me, on the other hand, I was trying to blend in. I was trying to do what I had to do and stay out of trouble. And for some reason, that always seemed to amplify the attention that was on me, right? It's like every time in my life that I have tried to blend in or tried to conform, it's like the universe is like, no, you're not allowed to do that. It's not going to work for you. Right? And there again, going back to my birth chart, I'm going to say that I'm pretty confident my Uranus squared my Venus in Leo has something to do with that, right? I've gotten a bunch of messages on the pattern app that have talked about that kind of thing too. And it's like, I knew it before I got the app, and then the app's like, because of these placements, this might be a contributing factor to these things happening. It's like, fuck. You mean there's a reason based on my birth chart that I can't conform, and like everything's going to blow up in my face if I try to? Okay, good to know. Anyway, so the frustrations with the name change stuff, right? So the biggest thing that I talked about yesterday, because that I was thinking about yesterday morning, was, okay, like there was a thing I had that went to collections, and when I was changed with, it was my married name, or I had it changed to my married name. They had no issue changing it. However, the guy spelled it wrong. So rather than a K, he put a SCH. Right? So it was like letters different, right? And it changed the whole sound of it and all this stuff. It's like, you could see the parts of it that were accurate based on the married name that I had, but it wasn't right either. So it was a frustration thing. And every time I mentioned it, they didn't change it after the one time, right? They had no problem changing it when I said I got married, I need to change my name. But then when I got divorced, I went back to change my name. It was an issue. So, I haven't dealt with that one. It's been a while since I've had anything to do with that one, because it's just pissed me off. Because I have tried to change my name multiple times on it, and the last time I actually answered a call that ended up being from the company, and they asked if this is my name, and I was like, no, that has never been my fucking name. Right? So anyway, that's irrelevant. It's just one of those things that it was annoying, right? But it's like thinking through the things that were easy to change, or easy-ish to change when I got married, right? Because everybody was willing to take my name from the old name to the new name with just the certificate, right? But then when I got divorced, trying to undo it was a whole new layer of difficulty. And it's like, it wasn't just as simple as having the divorce paperwork that says going back to the old name, which, I didn't really love doing that, but I wasn't keeping the other name. But so what I was thinking about yesterday was the idea of, basically, since I felt like, since I needed somebody outside of me to save me, and my dad basically fed me to the wolves, and, he hated my husband from the get-go, but not enough to say so before we got married, right? So I was thinking about this idea of, basically, because, yes, my father made the decision to marry my mother and have kids and all that stuff, but it was more to fulfill his obligation to the family rather than this was what he wanted, right? It was to be available to take care of his parents when they got to their older years. And that was why he made the decisions that he did. Because of that, I've always had this sense of feeling like a burden, right? Because, I always felt like he resented me. My brother was the one that has mentioned the woman that my dad dated before my mom, but she went to Germany with the military. He had the opportunity to go. He didn't go because his parents, right? So since they split up, he instead married my mom, right? And in the unpacking of things, that's been the thing that I've come around to, is just that really realize, like, I always felt like a burden, right? And I always felt like my existence was a problem. So yesterday's thoughts that I was writing about was basically I went from being my father's trash to being my husband's trash, right? Because neither one of those were good situations. But then there was a struggle because when I, was trying to undo the name stuff once I got married, I didn't like for email, I didn't want to go back to Jones. It's like, I want no part of that. So I came up with something completely different because I was tired of being associated with that name, right? Like, even on like my social media, I have my first and middle name instead of my last. My last is nowhere to be found on there. I mean, people know me because of that. People that have known me for a long time know that that's what it technically is at the moment, but it's still, I don't connect with it. I don't use it unless I absolutely have to. So I was thinking about that point of going from my father's trash to my husband's trash, because that idea that, the daughter is property of the father until she is property of the husband, right? But because neither one of them gave a shit about me, it was simply, I went from being my father's trash to being my husband's trash, because that was all I knew, right? Because being a burden and being a problem existing, no matter what I tried to do otherwise, it's like I could never get past that. That was always the biggest thing. I was always very aware of feeling like a burden. So I have no problem saying that, whenever something happens to my father, oh well, if I'm around, maybe I'll go to the funeral. If I'm not, I can't promise I will. But yesterday I was thinking too, it's like, this is just like the video that I did yesterday talking about all this stuff. It's like I got really hung up on this stuff and was like talking, like that was the extent of the video, was talking about this for an hour. But okay, so there's a lot with 2025 is the year of the snake. So that being the case, there's a lot of, stuff that we're having to shed to get out of our systems this year so we can go into the next year and, start afresh. So like everything with this whole space and the venting about the family stuff and all that stuff, it's needed to happen, right? But it still brings me back to this idea of, how much am I going to fucking talk about this shit, right? Because it's like, here we are again, going down this route, and okay, cool. Next thing I know, that's like what the whole damn video is, but it's one of those things where I've thought many times, it's like, at what point is it going to be okay to move to the next thing and get this out of, like, be done with this, right? Just not have it be a thing that's even a problem anymore. And so last night I did my little card drawing for the day for Sunday, and when I turned the page to come to this week, I realized I had forgotten to do the new moon reading, which the new moon was on the 12th, so I went ahead and pulled some cards for that. And the one that, or like the last question on the page was, what can I rely on this cycle? And I pulled two cards for it, and one was the Ancient Ones reversed. Oops, here's my page. It's from this mystical Shaman oracle deck. But for reversed, it says, the Ancient Ones beseech you to examine your attitudes and actions and be sure that they are of the highest integrity. Not forgiving an ancestor or yourself is keeping you from the freedom you seek. Remember, this is no longer your karma. You can break the chains that once bound you to the family drama and be free of your generational curses. Forgive the ones you need to release. Then the last thing is just honor your biological ancestors by lighting a candle to them tonight. Okay, so like, and I've talked about that on here a lot too. It's like, I don't feel like like forgiving my father is the issue. Yes, I keep talking about this stuff over and over again, but it's not so much because I haven't forgiven him. It's that I've needed to unravel it for myself so I can understand it and understand how I got so stuck in my life. And more for that point of, I'll do it again, of forgiving myself, right? Because because of my conditioning and my bad beliefs, I allowed myself to believe that I was trash, right? And so the thing that I've struggled with, anyway, it goes back to like the one piece, or yourself, right? Forgive your ancestors or yourself. I think that's the part that I struggle with more. It's not about forgiving anybody else. In fact, okay, when I first moved back after I was getting my divorce, I got really latched onto this one song. It's Smith and Myers, Not Mad Enough. And I kept listening to this song, and one day I realized it's like I wasn't letting myself process through the anger. It's like I wasn't allowing myself to be angry about like the shit with my ex. So it's like I was just trying to abort and move on, right? It's like, we're disconnected, now let's, get to this next thing and make that go away and just, disappear. But it's like, to do that doesn't actually address any of the feelings that need to be addressed, right? So the big thing with the Ancient Ones card in reverse that I got from that was going back to that forgiving myself piece. But the other card was the Spiral, and it says the Spiral is a guide for entering deep into one's consciousness and the unknown, and then extending far out into the heavens. It is crucial to surrender to this journey until the exhausted paradigm dissolves in the depths of the psyche and its energy is released to give birth to a new reality. To renew yourself, you must shed your own old skin. You have already done this, so do not keep scraping away at the old, but welcome the soft new skin that is starting to grow. Break the habit of working on your faults all the time and let nature take its course. Know that a new skin feels vulnerable and scary at times. Trust the medicine of the Spiral as it guides your journey of renewal. I've talked a lot on here about how it's like my, like everything I've done in the videos, it's like I keep talking about the same stuff, right? It's like every video, it's like the themes or like points that I go back to. It's like I keep coming back to the same stuff. It's like, how do you ever have new stuff to talk about? And I guess what I really was sitting with this card last night was let it dissolve out, right? It's like you have to feel the feelings and go through all of that stuff, and you have to tell it as many times as you need to tell it to get it out of your system. Right? And okay, so I watched another tarot reading that I'm not going to mention the creator just for the sake of the reason I'm mentioning it was because she was focusing on this one point of needing to be more positive. And that's something that, like, I heard that her say this, and then the videos, like, I think she posted it back in June, but I watched it like today. But like, that was one of the things, it was need to be more positive. It's like, I feel like this is, it's directly connected to that spiral thing. Like the spiral, it's like you actually have to work your way through all the layers of the shitty stuff that you've been through in order to be able to release it, right? But if you're just like going along and, that kind of falls into the toxic positivity. If it's just, well, you just need to be more positive. Yes, whatever energy you are repeatedly putting out there is what's going to be reflected back. But if you don't allow yourself the time and space to work through it and get it out of your system, let it dissolve, then there's, that's kind of a snag too, right? And I think that's one of those things that is like an essential part of my journey, is that point. It's like, I've always had, one of my my crabby downfalls with all my cancer placements is that I have a tendency to go towards pessimism. But also, when there's a bunch of hard shit you're dealing with through the years and you don't really know why you're doing the things you're doing, or like where that stuff's coming from, and your family's in your head with all the negativity as well, it makes it even more difficult to navigate, right? Excuse me. So it's like I absolutely appreciate that there is a need for the space to invite better things in, right? And more positive things. But at the same time, if you don't give yourself the space to work through the shit and get it out of your system and be able to clear it, like that's part of the transmutation process, right? That's part of how we alchemize what we've been through, is we got to work through it and understand it at a different level, understand why it's a problem and why it hurt so bad, right? Or why we got so completely stuck in it. And okay, like the whole twin flame connection thing that I talk about a whole lot, that has been an essential part of my healing process, right? Because, so before I had any idea who he was to me, and I just had the little deal with encountering his energy on the freaking live stream where I said something and he responded, and then I had like this, it was like this whole sort of crumbling on my end. And like I've described it many times as it was basically like I was a mouse running through the kitchen and somebody turned the lights on. It's like right. And that's been a huge part of the journey too. But I needed the one thing to sort of activate me into the space of being able to heal from the junk, because there has been a lot of those messages throughout the years of not allowing myself to deal with the anger, right? Or not allowing myself to deal with the pain even. And so like for the anger part, even before the song, when I was in undergrad, I had a Bible study leader I was doing this discipleship thing with. And basically it was just spending time with a friend, right? And we would talk about things. And one day, I was talking about something that was really kind of shitty. I don't remember what it was, but it was something with my family. And I just said it was annoying. And like, she called me out because that was always what I was doing. It's like I was always just shrugging it off as something was annoying. And she's like, no, she said, if you're pissed, be pissed. She said, annoying is a fly, flying around you and won't leave you alone. If you are angry, you need to own that you are angry in that moment in order for you to be able to get it out of your system, right? And it was like, that was one of the things that came up when, I got hooked on that song. I just kept listening to it over and over again. And then all at once it was like, I'm not letting myself process through the anger of the situation, like how I even got into that toxic situation with my ex. And it goes back to that point of, I lived believing myself to be trash because that's how I always felt with my father, right? So another part of what I was thinking, like with this whole name thing, is like, the idea is if you marry somebody, and however the name taking or whatever goes, right? It's usually going to be the wife taking the husband's name. But it happens all sorts of ways nowadays. So, but that being my reference point, my framework that that I'm most familiar with in, of course, my own situation. It's like the way my dad was with it was I was a burden. So I was essentially trash. So he didn't value me. So when it came to me ending up with this toxic connection with somebody that he didn't like, he let me go anyway, right? Let me do it because because it was better for me to be that dude's trash than his trash, right? But then I was thinking like this whole like counterpart connection thing, and it's like if you actually end up with somebody that you choose and that you want to be with because obviously there were all choices that ended up with all of those situations. But if you choose because it wasn't out of obligation to somebody, if you're able to choose for the sake of your own happiness and what you actually want, ideally you're going to be choosing somebody that is also equally choosing you, right? So, whereas my ex needed somebody to help him with his custody shit, and all I knew about myself at that point in time was I like helping people. And so that was something I could do, right? So, once I fulfilled that requirement, he didn't have any need for me. So then I was, literally trash to him, right? So, I talked about the stuff with the dogs, and, the one day he was chasing Taz around trying to kick him. And I stood up to him, got in his face, and told him if you laid a hand on my dog, we were going to have some big issues. And he like went all out sadistic and was like laughing in my face and, oh, this is what I needed you to do the whole time. And like, I've always been passive because going back to the biggest toxic conditioning point that I grew up with, the idea that, women are supposed to be subservient to men, right? That was basically my choosing passivity rather than standing up for myself in the times that I needed to was, again, bad conditioning, but also in that situation it was a sort of protective instinct, because had I stood up for myself earlier, that probably would have that situation was always toxic. But it is like anytime it was a protective instinct, because there was a lot of, basically what came up was when I stood up for myself, then he was looking for the way to strike me back down, basically, right? And I knew from other things that he'd said, because he was making it a regular thing to say, so there was the two comments that he was making most often was, he should have raped me when he had the chance, and also he could see himself getting so angry that he saw himself getting so angry that he could see himself accidentally killing somebody someday. And so then the situation with Taz comes up, and I stand up to him, and then there's the next thing that happened, I think within just a couple days, where he decided that I just needed to get laid and then I wouldn't go anywhere. And so he tried to force himself on me, and I shoved him. And when I shoved him, all three dogs jumped in, and like Gidget laid across my chest, Taz stood over my waist, and Ziva stood over my feet. And Ziva and Taz were just snarling and barking at him. And I saw him start swatting at Ziva. She was the oldest at that point in time. She'd been with us the longest. And he went right for her, trying to antagonize her to bite him. And it was in that moment I had this, there's that intuitive voice chiming in saying, they're doing their job of protecting you. It is now your job to protect them. It is time to go. Right? And it was basically faced with that realization that, that if I stayed there, then either we're at the point where he was looking for something to get rid of me, right? So we were at the point where either he was going to kill me or he was going to do something to one of my dogs to get to me that way. And it's like, if something happened to me, at that point in time, I didn't care. But the idea of my dogs being stuck with him because I wasn't there, it's like, that's not an option. So, and being around any longer to see that play out where he did one of them harm to get to me, that wasn't going to work either, right? So it was like, we're done here. It's done, right? That's just all there is to it. It's done. And that was the week that we left. And, of course, knowing all the things that I knew, because I was trying to write. Journaling was kind of difficult back in those days because I always felt like there was a chance that he would get into my journals and see what I had written and somehow use it against me, right? So it's like, it was safer for me not to write. But writing was one of those things that when I did it enough, it made me really connect with the fact that this is a problem, right? When I left in December 2015. Was it 15? Yeah. I had been journaling, right? And I would try to keep them somewhere he wasn't, or he didn't have access to. But it's like, when I started realizing that I needed to leave and get out of that situation, it's like that inner voice was like, yes, we're going to do the thing. We're going to get the fuck up out of here. But then, when I did leave, then he got in my head again and was like, you only left because of your family, right? But I disconnected from my journals enough that I lost sight of, did I leave for my family or did I leave for me? Right? So the journaling thing has been so freaking essential, and yet I've neglected it so many times throughout my life. In fact, the only reason I've been consistently writing recently is because January 2024, so I'm aware of who the twin flame connection is and all this stuff. And now I'm navigating what I know of this situation and what I'm learning along the way, right? So, of course, going back to that point of how I was afraid of my ex finding anything that I had written because I wasn't saying nice things about him, right? But it's like I had myself blocked from really being able to write and to connect with myself, because writing is a means of me connecting with myself, and really being honest about what's going on. And that was something like with the bad conditioning. It's like, it comes down to, I really wasn't being honest with myself. I was taught to, because I was raised to believe I needed something outside of me to save me. I never trusted my intuition. I never trusted, the gut instincts that were telling me that I wasn't in a good situation. With my ex too. We met on a dating app. And when he first sent me a message, it's like all the red flags were there. And it's like, he didn't say anything that was particularly of note, but it's like, It's like the warning bells were going off, and what I said in that moment was, yeah, right, this isn't a good option. And yet for some reason, because I was taught not to trust myself, we ended up going on a first date. And at that point, because I was newly out of basic training in AIT and just moved back home and didn't know jack shit about who I was and how I fit back into this world, knowing that I'm stronger than I thought I was when I left, I still didn't know who I was, right? And I've been taught to doubt myself all these ways along the way, and that's basically what ended up getting me into that situation. Was all the times that I chipped away at my sense of self or tried to dial it down because I saw myself as my father's trash, or whatever, right? So it's like, and I wandered again. What I was thinking was, with the name thing, right? So it's like, if you choose somebody, like actively choose somebody based on what you know and want in a relationship, in a partnership, right? Like a partner. Then I feel like the marriage situation, when you choose it from a good space and from a space of knowing what you don't want, knowing what you do want, and choosing to go along with what you do want instead of being swayed by the world and pushed into something you don't want. But if you get into that situation, if you get married to somebody because you choose them fully, right, then that name thing, the taking on of the name, it's like, that's more of a means of essentially taking care of the person that is joining your life, right? It's a means of, you choose somebody, you want them there, you want to take care of them because you love them, right? It's not because you're obligated to, like my whole family situation, right? It's all obligation, right? Because I was my father's trash, he expects that I'm supposed to take care of him. He can fucking piss off. So just really, and then if you choose to have kids and then, they enter in with this name, it's like, that is, so if my father had married in a way that was choosing for himself because of himself and not choosing the option that was most conducive to allowing him to be available to fulfilling duties to his parents or whatever, then you become the caretaker of these things that are supposed to be, these people that are supposed to be important to you, right? But it was never that, right? So that was one of the big frustration points. So that's kind of I wander all over the place. And since I hate when I have multiple starts, because then I don't remember if what I talked about in the start of this video was actually included, if I wander back to something later. But yeah, I don't know. Anyway, that's where I'm at today. The biggest thing being that piece of, once again, yes, connecting to this other part of the past, and basically just allowing myself to work through the healing spiral, right? To work through all the levels of it and to see it thoroughly, to see it clearly. So when I leave the situation for good, I know why. I know how I got to that point. I know, all the things that have have led to me making the decisions that I'm making at this point in time, right? I want to leave because I want to have a life I choose. I don't want to be shrinking down or chipping away at myself forever because that's what I was raised to do. That's what I was conditioned to do. That's what I learned that was what my life taught me that I had to do, right? So, to really be able to get it to work all the way through it so it can dissolve out. It's like I feel like I'm right there. But that's one of those things has been the struggle is, why do I keep going back to this stuff, right? My brother and I were talking about some stuff yesterday, and he said he saw an ad for the 49ers and Indy game, and he was talking about how upset he was just at having seen the thing. It's like, you gonna watch it? It's like, if I can. And you're like, just as far as like all the connections that have to be worked through to clear this shit, this is kind of an interesting point too, where our parentage situation has always been toxic, right? But he's commented on how it's like we have the specific issue with the opposite sex parent, right? So my issues with our dad, his main issues with our mom. It's like, I have lots of issues with our mom, but I still, for some reason, struggle with that, being able to, I guess, see, I can see it for the shit that she's done. Like, I can see the silent treatment that she has always given me and my brother, and how it's a toxic thing to coerce us into behaving how she wants us to behave, right? It's like all at once getting real cloudy back there. And I can see that's a problem. Like, I know various reasons of why that's a problem. And, I was able to start pointing that stuff out to my brother as well. But for some reason, I have a harder time saying fuck you to her than I do my father. And my brother's kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum. That guy scared the crap out of me. Haven't seen him in a while. He walks over here a lot. Usually I passed him when I was skating. But anyway, like my brother, he can see and appreciate the fact that I have so many issues with our father, but he doesn't get them the same way, right? He doesn't understand that, like the full deal of like what's in that situation. And it's like, I feel like a part of that is he doesn't get to feel the misogyny, right? The fact that he just like flat out hates women, right? So my brother's not affected by that because he's not a woman. But then he still has to heal from the stuff with our mom being toxic. And I've had a lot that I've had to work through on that end. But like, okay, when it comes to talking about disconnecting from our parents, I have no problem never seeing my dad again, right? If I leave and never turn back, I have no problem with him. For some reason, I struggle with my mom. And what I, like, as I'm sitting here thinking through it, it's like I feel like that has to do with that, I don't know, it's a healing the mother line issue, but like I've talked on here a lot about how, I heard someone mention that, okay, a couple points. First, that little girls, when they're getting ready to be born, or little girls are born with all the eggs that they will have in their lifetime, right? So, in that respect, when my grandmother was pregnant with my mother, and my mother had all the eggs she was going to have, you know, in her lifetime, because, because she was a girl, then that connects 3 generations, right? So I've talked on here a lot about how when my grandfather entered the contract with my grandmother, and she actively made the decision to be his enabler, right? Or his mommy was very much pushing her to know how she needed to treat her boy, all this shit, right? So my grandmother was told flat out that she had to cater to his bullshit, and of course, being one of the last in the friend group that my grandfather was involved with, and he knocked her up and therefore had to marry her to do the right thing. That's like 3 generations that are connected to that resentment, right? To her basically becoming his trash, because that's how she was raised as well, right? Because that's a thing. If you are not genuinely valued by the people that have brought you into the world, then you're essentially their trash. And that's why we've existed in a system where the older generations can basically just point and laugh at the younger generations, because haha, you have to do like I did now, or now you have it as hard as I always did, right? That's like the big thing in my family is now you have to deal with this stuff that I had to deal with. Why would you want to bring children into the world to leave a shittier world for them to have to deal with, right? And going back to like the situation with my father, it's the realization that I was his trash, right? He didn't value me. He didn't see me as important, as something he needed to take care of. He provided for, but like provided like the bare minimum, just because, yeah, okay, so I was fed and clothed and all that stuff. Maybe not beaten often compared to some other kids, but don't get me wrong, there were still plenty of times, like I remember, and that was the biggest thing. It's like, because the discipline doesn't come through, the discipline side that didn't belong to my dad, that belonged to my mom. Just be like how my grandfather always saw himself as some sort of superhero because he couldn't hit a little girl because he just felt like a bully. So he let my grandma beat on them. And it was okay then, because he wasn't doing it. But abuse is still abuse. And wailing on children is abuse. And so while my father wasn't necessarily the one doing that, I'm confident he's aware of the times where, okay, like there was one day my mom and I got into it in the car. We dropped my high school boyfriend off at his house and we were fighting in the car. And I was like all the way shrinking myself as much as I possibly could against the passenger side door because she was trying to swing at me. Right? So as soon as we got home, like I was unbelted before she even stopped moving the car, and I got out and had all my stuff ready. I like flew into the house because I knew she was coming after me, right? And so I'm like a 16-year-old, I think, 17 probably, and I mean, I called her a fucking bitch because she was being a fucking bitch, but like I knew she was coming at me too. So it was just like I flew back into my room as quickly as I could, and I had a futon bunk bed, so I jumped on the bunk bed because I knew I would be relatively out of reach. And yeah, it's like she still got a few hits in, but she was like standing on the futon at the bottom part of my bed and was like trying to reach me. So it's like I'm trying to get as far away from her as possible. So it's like those moments, it's like I know my brother was aware of those moments when he was around. So, but of course, we couldn't say anything when the other one was getting anything like that, right? And the big thing with him, he remembered. Okay, so there was this kid that my mom used to babysit when I think was he in my grade? I think he was in my grade. I think we were in 4th grade. My brother's 2.5 years older than me, but like 3 grades ahead. So he would have been 7th. Mom got pissed at this kid that she was babysitting, and she went off on him like that, and that ended up being the end of her babysitting stuff. Like that was the mom obviously got very pissed, and there was some legal stuff involved. I don't know all those details. I was in 4th grade, but when my brother and I have talked about it, because that was something that came up in the past couple of years too. When my grandfather was in the hospital after he shattered his femur and had to have surgery to have it repaired, and that ended up like as soon as he broke his femur, it was like a downhill. Like that was the beginning of the end. Excuse me, if you will. But there was a day, okay, when he was at the hospital that operated on his leg, because it was a trauma hospital. I was the one that spent my time making sure my aunt and my grandma were able to get there. My mom was living with every time he was at the hospital, she was living with him at the hospital, my mom. So one day my grandma uses me as an excuse to leave. Right? She didn't want to be at the hospital anymore, so she said she was going to let me go back to whatever else I had going on for the day, right? And it was basically, she was just looking for a way to not have to be at the hospital. But of course, my grandfather was appalled that she wouldn't spend all her time there like my mother was. But at least my mother was there, so that gave my grandma a little bit of an out. But, of course, he and my mom were still making the comments to each other about, well, if she was the one that was in the hospital and couldn't go anywhere, I wouldn't leave. And my mom said, I know you wouldn't, and all this stuff, like some kind of goddamn superhero. It's like he just would have annoyed her to death. And that's the thing. So the fact that it was him there that was stuck, she wanted to leave, right? Because she wanted the escape. Well, so since I was still very actively involved, or I hadn't really started setting my boundaries back then, I saw what was happening. It's like, all right, well, I'm down for getting the hell up out of here before rush hour, so whatever. I figured we were going to be there till after rush hour, and that was no big deal at that point in time. But, she used me as an excuse to leave sooner. And when we're on the way home, she said she wanted to go for Mexican. It's like, all right. So, I mentioned a couple places, and then, of course, we ended up going to the place in town, which was fine because we loved that place. My aunt and I were there earlier. But as we're on the way, we go past the neighborhood that kid used to live in. And my grandmother I was just letting her talk. Like, we weren't having a conversation. She was just rambling. And she said something about she was really surprised that my mom didn't get or have any jail time for the way that went down or something. And just something that was completely like off the chain. And I was just like, what? And it's like, the more I sat with it when she said that, or I think it was, she was surprised she didn't get arrested for it. The more I sat with that idea, it's like, so you knew it was abuse and you chose not to do anything, right? So that was the big point where I stopped wanting to have anything to do with my grandmother. It's like, you knew what was going on was abusive and you just let us deal with it. What the fuck, right? So anyway, my brother and I were talking about that, and I told him about this conversation with my grandma. You know, he mentioned that that kid's mom had to call our mom off when she was wailing on my brother at some point in time. And he said he didn't remember what had happened or anything, but, you know, that kid's mom was there when she snapped at him and, you know, kind of just went off and started beating on him. And she was trying to calm her down to, you know, get her off of my brother, right? So it's like just that whole situation is like, this is fucking ridiculous, right? That my grandmother could see it as abuse and just, you know, keep her mouth shut and just do her own thing, right? Because of course she did the same shit to her kids, right? So my mom did that to me and my brother because it's what she knew. But then it's like, I'm just, it's like I'm just seeing like all these different levels of this shit for the shit that it is, right? And I'm immensely grateful that when I was in high school, I got to a point where I flat out said, if I cannot heal from the stuff she is putting on me to have to heal from, I don't ever want to have kids, because I don't want to do this. I will not perpetuate the shit that she's doing, right? So, you know, and I think part of it is like, I've seen the shit that she's done, and I don't know, is it just that the trauma bond is somehow more, I'm somehow more connected to my mom. Like, I don't know what it is that makes it harder for me to be able to say I can walk away from her and never look back. My dad, I have no problem saying that. I will not miss him when I'm gone. I will not miss him when he's gone. But just still navigating the whole thing is just like a fucking hot mess. I had a thought that I wanted to to tie that whole point up, I think, and I'm not even sure what it was. Oh, it's like, while my dad wasn't the one that was actively participating in that, I have had to see over and over again all the ways that he was doing, like that point that I mentioned earlier, where, you know, I would like the thing at the restaurant, so he's going to order it, to try it, so he can tell me how bad it is, or mediocre, because it's something that he knows I like. That kind of stuff, like seeing all of the ways he's always done that. Like even fucking today, Taz was barking, and he thought it was cute and funny until he went into his room, and then Taz was still barking, and then it's like, shut up! And it's like, stop fucking antagonizing him and making him and acting like it's a good thing if you're just gonna get annoyed 30 seconds later. Because it's something that he's always done. He has never not done this. It is, you know, finding the thing to pick at you, because that's a means of chipping away at your sense of self, at the things that you like, so your worth, right? So it's like just confirming the ways that he already feels like you're trash. So, you know, he's just, you know, of course you like trash things, right? Of course the stuff that you like is not that good, right? So it's like, I don't know if it's just that my brother's not looking at those kinds of things or what, but it's like, that's the thing I've had to see and face more clearly in the past couple years, like through this whole healing journey process thing, is just dealing with that point. You know, like my damn bear picture, right? My mom tries to push me to ask my dad to help me with the printer. I, under no circumstances, wanted to ask my dad for help, because I know how they are. If I would have asked him for help in that situation, then he could have, talked down to me and, let me know how stupid that I am because I couldn't figure this thing out. And when I didn't want to do that, it's like my mom tried to push me to talk to him about it. And then he jumps in, and saying, what was it? I think I said something about it's just not reading that it's connected to the printer or whatever, because it was a thing that I forgot to make sure that the printer was on before I hit print. And it wasn't. So then there was this issue where it was like having a hard time connecting for whatever reason. It took like 5-10 minutes longer because I hadn't checked to make sure it was already on beforehand. But when my mom was trying to get me to ask him for help, and I was just like, I'm not there yet. And he's like, well, what's it doing? And I said, it's showing that it's not connected. He said, well, probably because it's not connected. It's like, shut the fuck up. I do not need your help. I did not ask for your help. I intentionally try not to ask for their help if I can at all avoid it. Right? It's like, this is one of those things. It's like me and my brother both do it. It's like, it's a toxic trait that we have acquired, that we are hyper independent on some things because of how we were raised, right? So it's like, we don't want to ask for help because we don't want to have to deal with the fallout of that, which is largely being made to feel like we're stupid, right? So if that's what or if that is how you've always been treated in those situations, why would you go out of your way to ask for help or be open to other people's help when it usually just results in getting bullied in another way, right? So anyway, I'm kind of going long again. But I feel like I'm at enough of a stopping point for today, I guess. Yeah. As always, I appreciate you. Until the next time. See ya.